Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to UncommonCents number 51. It's Craig Camanis and Dean Holmes here with you again for today. Hello, Dean.
G'day, Craig.
And it's a very special welcome to a special guest today, Mr. Jason Dunn. Now, this conversation could be unlimited, everybody, and you'll understand that in a moment. But, I actually worked with Jason. We just worked out off air probably about 10 years ago. And there's been a massive transformation from someone that I saw running to work, holding a suit and then wearing it to where he is today. And, I think this is a great story for us to bring you because quite possibly in all of the people I know, Jason has probably had more sliding door moments than anyone else that I know within my network and circle. And so it'll be great to unpack some of that today. He's an author, a freak of nature runner, and an all-round good guy. And Jason, welcome to UncommonCents, mate. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, Craig. Very kind.
Perhaps, mate, if we could just start off just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you've been and where you've got to, and then we can open up to questions there.
Okay, where I've been, I guess in a nutshell, where I've been is over the last 25 years since my life-changing epiphany, if you like, which was finding my real purpose. I've swum 1,500 kilometers. I've cycled 2.5 times the circumference of the Earth, and I've run even further. So I've run 3.5 times the circumference of the Earth. So that's 1,500, 105,000 kilometers on a bike, and 130,000 kilometers running on my feet. I did count the steps in that along with walking, and it was pretty close to 1 billion. So that's a pretty reasonable daily average. So, but look, essentially my career has been predominantly in financial advice. So hopefully that resonates with the audience. And I've lived 2 lives. I lived a life up until I was 35, and then a life of real purpose since then. So the last 25 years. So I'm 60, obviously. And today, I think probably what I'm sharing is, how the pathway that I found, which was learning to face fears, to not take the easier road, and to go after things that I thought were truly impossible, and hopefully inspire and share some of those insights. Obviously, there's a lot more in my book because my new purpose is, well, it always has been to help people, but now it really is about helping people create a limitless life. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I've probably got some more specific questions, and I'll pause because I will talk forever.
Very good.
You
Jason,
know that.
The first thing from my perspective, everyone loves to have a sporting analogy and a team-related analogy. So we get a lot of inspiration, I suppose, in business around the team, the teamwork, the team members, and those type of things. And we translate that sporting analogy into working together as a team. Talk to us about your journey, because there was a team of one, as I understand, in Ironman. And so how can we use our individual teamwork, working on ourselves, and roll that into the business analogies?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. Great point, Dean. So my philosophy is that, and I have been a leader in business. I've been a GM in large corporate businesses. I've been a CEO of a national business, and I'm not sure that I was ever the greatest leader, but as life went along, I realized I constantly had more to learn, and I opened my mind to continually learning. However, you don't have to be the best leader, but for me to be the best leader, you have to be the best that you can be, or to continue to better yourself. And which means, a lot of that comes back to, your own health, your own well-being, your own purpose, the goals you set, how you feel about yourself. And, look, again, if I can kind of go back to that life-changing, pivotal time for me, I thought I did pretty well in life. I had a pretty good career. I was good sportsman as a kid. I was a very good soccer player, but then I found other distractions at 15. I'm going to leave it to your imagination as to what they were. I'm sure you'll be able to guess. So I went off after those other things, and I think I did, kind of pretty well. But I would tell people, the thing that I would say to people often, especially over a beer, and Craig, in the corporate life, we entertain, we go to a lot of dinners, we have beers. And I would tell people that I'd say, I could have been a professional soccer player, as though that was relevant or impressive. And ironically, it was the exact opposite, because what I realized when I looked in the mirror, what it meant was you could have been, and you had the talent, but you actually didn't. You chose not to. And I chose it was too much of a risk at 15, and so I pursued my schoolwork, and I lived in that shadow, and that regret. And regret is a terrible thing in life as you grow older if you don't do something about it. And your destiny, your legacy ends up owning you as opposed to you owning it. So I kind of woke up one day and just went, I've actually got I'm going to, at 60, which is my legacy test, you're going to look back and you're going to regret, and you're going to be in all sorts of pain. So how do you change that? And how do you stop taking the easier road and take, smaller steps, and then just go after things that are very significant? So, so that was about how I developed myself, and my purpose was to actually find out what my limits were, what I was actually capable of, predominantly in sport, but then also that pervades into business. I mean, the two are entirely linked.
Yep.
So that was literally what am I capable of. Sorry, mate.
I'll drill on something you said then. So at 15, you were sitting there going, I have the potential to be a professional soccer player.
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming most kids who want to go down that path at 15, that's all they're thinking about. Yet your mind took you on an assessment of, that's too much risk, I'm going to revert to schoolwork, which feels like the exact opposite of 15-year-old.
It does. I followed my heart I followed my head instead of following my heart. I grew up in the UK, so 3/4 of every kids in the UK, predominantly males back then, that was the dream. And I played 3 or 4 games a week. I represented my equivalent of my state, and I got an offer for an apprenticeship for a first division club, which was second tier, so fully professional. And I'd have to get on 2 trains, travel 2.5 hours one way, 2.5 hours back, do that 3 or 4 times a week. It was just that really was that was almost too difficult. But I knew I had to do something more practical, and in many ways I regretted it. So a little bit counterintuitive. And it was all I wanted. That was everything that I wanted. So I certainly, the regret ate away over the years until I got to the point where I imagined what it would feel like in retirement. And in our industry, we talk to people a lot about, that was my big thing in financial advice, was helping people to see the things that they couldn't and they never got to practice, that were a number of years away, that from experience you knew would happen. The largest financial event of your life is losing your income. And so that probably made me reflect even more deeply around, well, what are you going to think about your life? And do you want to sit there and, regret all the things that you could have or you should have done? And I just couldn't live with that.
And so now, what was the turning point where you turned from regret and telling people what you could have been to defining where you are on that day, and then some of the steps you took after that? Yeah,
great question. So if you read the book, I think you might have read the book, you'll know that
our listeners, Oprah's book club coming live. There's a guy without a shirt here and wearing his t-shirt on his head, I think.
That's so that's at 16,000 feet above sea level in the Himalayas in a 333k race. I do look like a bit of a madman there, but just a quick plug, by the way, on the front cover is a fantastic review from one of the greatest ultra runners in history, which is the legendary Pat Farmer. So anyway, no more promos. So a friend of mine actually at Westpac persuaded me to do a little corporate triathlon, and I was a pack a cigarette a day smoker. I thought, yeah, why not? I can do that. You know, it's a 3K run. I can do that standing on my head, even if I'm not doing a lot. And as the weeks went by, we met up, and he said, "Hey, how are you going with the training? You know, how's the swimming going?" And I just looked at him, and the colour drained from my face, and I went, "You what?" And he basically explained. I said, "Well, I'm just doing the run." He said, "No, you're doing all three." So anyway, my biggest fear in life was drowning, and I couldn't swim from one side of the pool to the other, let alone to the other end. Having grown up in the UK, and I just made this. I kind of knew in my head that this was like a pivotal point in life, that this was my greatest fear, and so I couldn't back out. So I used to go to the swimming pool and sit there for 15 minutes with my fists grabbing the steering wheel, trying to motivate myself not to leave and to go in. And anyway, it's kind of a long story. I did it. I nearly drowned. I swam half of it, you know, like a turtle on being flipped over, but I survived it, and I did pretty well in the end. And I was kind of that adrenaline and that sense of satisfaction, just, you know, it was consuming. And I was looking for something else to do. And 3 weeks later, I saw this sort of curiosity on the wide world of sports, which is the Hawaii Ironman World Championships, which is now kind of one of the most iconic endurance events on the planet. And I went, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And so I just swam 300 meters, which I had to multiply by 12 in open water. And I cycled 12, so I had to multiply that by 16 to do the 180k bike ride in 80-kilometer winds and up to 55 degrees, something or other in the energy lab, and then get off and run a marathon as opposed to 3Ks. I was so excited. I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do it, but I was so excited. And that's when I evolved sort of my own 90-day high performance template. And what I actually did was I went, right, so my goal now is to qualify for and you have to qualify, you have to go fast enough in your age group, a whole bunch of races around the world, sort of 80 or 100,000 Ironman athletes try to qualify. So I had to bring that back and go, well, okay, well, to do that, you've actually got to qualify in an Ironman. So I at least have to do an Ironman. So Ironman Australia, set my sights on 12 months away. And then basically I worked that backwards to have these kind of, put some flags in and said, these are the measures along the way to build confidence. And a lot of achievement is about creating smaller experiences that create confidence so that you believe more wholeheartedly and you can go after what you really believe in. And then I said, you know what, whenever you create a huge goal, what you need to do is distill that back into something that makes every single day count, and where you're really clear, whether it's in business, or in sport or health, that you know what you've got to do and get up and do every single day. And so I have a really specific 90-day high performance clarity template, which I use with to guide a lot of new runners just to start to get going. And I've always used that in business. I've used that with leaders. I've used that with teams. I've used that with businesses. I've used that with myself, and I still use it. And so, I've set goals 10 years away and define that back to a 90-day plan, a clarity plan that helps me be really clear about the priority in that day or in that week or in that month, with the specific actions to achieve a certain milestone on the way to a much bigger goal. Because once upon a time in my life, I thought lots of things were impossible. Like when you think about some massive goal, like it's so overwhelming, it feels like it's impossible. So with absolutely any task, any goal or massive feat that you set yourself, you can distill it back to much smaller regular inputs that build the confidence that you'll get there in a year, 5 years, and 10 years if you just get up and you make no excuses and you do it.
And can we talk about this confidence bit? So that idea that you use the 90-day plan, but actually what you're trying to do is build this consistent confidence over time.
Absolutely.
And I talk to advisors about this. If you imagine as an advisor, you go and have a great client meeting. And so you walk out of that client meeting, you shake goodbye to you end the Zoom meeting or Teams meeting, or you shake your client's hand goodbye. And so you've got all this energy, and then you go back and do an email. And so you've just kind of deflated your confidence and energy, where you could do something completely different to multiply that confidence and energy. Would be simply to call another client. So call a prospect that hasn't said yes yet. Call your most annoying client and tell them something, call another client and get them to come in. But the idea of saying, I'm going to multiply my confidence by leveraging off yesterday or that previous meeting to do the same thing again. And I think that there's a lot of momentum in your advisor role that you can get from that, as well as obviously in your fitness role. Whether you run every day or every second day, that's still a consistent pattern, but it builds that confidence over time.
Indeed it does. And, the lack of confidence or fear is what holds most people back from achieving often the things that they're capable of doing, or not achieving. So basically settling for, I've known thousands of advisors, and I know lots of people settle, they believe that, and, they are good at something that they do, but they settle for good. And you need to invest in yourself. You need to practice. You need to train harder than the game, and you need to build that confidence. It is all about building a mindset. And for me, it was about building a mindset that didn't make me believe I was better than anybody else, because the only competition was myself. And it kind of it unshackled me from my neurological captors, if you like. But it's just about creating that confidence and just kind of, and building it in layers. But it is about mindset. So when I think about mindset, in my book, what I've tried to do is capture the things that help me create an unlimited mindset. So the belief that I could do anything, that I could achieve sporting feats, and probably business feats, but more sporting feats that, if you'd asked me a year before or 2 years before, I just said, you've got rocks in your head. You're absolutely nuts. I can't do that. And that is an incredibly empowering feeling when you actually create that belief and you believe you can do anything, because what your experience tells you is that you can do things that you think you couldn't do before. And again, that kind of builds on the confidence. So the foundations of those are gratitude, perspective. Gratitude and perspective will give you a platform to enable you to pretty much do anything. And my first realization, you've read, I've been hospitalized 35 times. 3 or 4 of those were very near fatal. I've lost count of operations or the types of bizarre things that have happened, like a trailer falling on me or whatever. So but you can, you can absolutely overcome anything. And the first time I truly got, realized how was grateful in life was when I kind of woke up, after a 6-hour operation where I nearly died at 18 from a car accident. I had 3 skull fractures, 16 jaw fractures. I had my jaw coming through here, had my teeth coming through my face, had my face wide up. I was torn to bits, and I sat there feeling so sorry for myself. But then I looked around and I realized I was in a hospital and I could see people that I knew probably weren't going to get out of there ever. And I suddenly found this incredible gratitude. And every single time I smashed myself up or nearly died, or I was in hospital, I would be grateful that I still was alive, to, number one. And then I developed these other things in terms of, a truly positive mindset doesn't mean you ignore the things that upset you, that make you sad or whatever. It's that you in the moment, you're able to bring your mindset back to being positive by creating perspective. There's a few different techniques that I've learned, because stress, whilst it does, sometimes it empowers you and it pushes you to go beyond where you can be. General stress for most people, where they're worrying about stuff that, I call it, the small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff, and you quickly put things on a perspective or a scale. You get on a bus and you hear someone else go, the bus was 5 minutes late. Oh, I hate that. Don't you hate that? And you go, really? You hate that? Is that where life's at? You hate being... So you've created this, massive negative sentiment within yourself because the bus was 5 minutes late. So I can't imagine what it must be like when something really goes wrong with you. So, stress causes body inflammation and is one of the biggest causes of shorter longevity. Stress, and being able to manage it in the moment, get positive, move on, overcome adversity.
Jason, one of the things I'm really picking up here is humility. And how by almost achieving your goals and getting to the things that you really wanted to get to and do has almost transformed into humility. Like you talked about back at the corporate days, sitting around that dinner with the beer, having to tell people I was going to be a professional soccer player, chest out, trying to match it with those egos that sit around that table versus now having done shit that people would just be blown away that you've done. And yet the humility is so kicked in from my observation. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but that's an amazing transformation that I think is important for everyone.
Well, like being humble, and I can tell you now, I wasn't always humble. Something I had to learn, and also showing weakness. Saying sorry. Whatever makes you a much happier and more content person, and then further you go along, you just feel more and more and more grateful, and you just look for things to do to help other people. So I'm fortunate I've got lots of time to do whatever I want. So so this morning I was on Facebook in different running groups and triathlon groups around the world, and people asking for help, so I just spend coincidentally people end up buying books. But you go on and you just help people. You just give them the advice. You just so that, I'm a new runner and I've started running and I've injured this, or how do I start, or whatever. And you just give back. And every time you do, that just, enriches your purpose. It's the most amazing feeling. It's better than, if you said, what would you rather, $500 or get on and send a message that helped change someone's life and empower them to go out and run, which, by the way, when you speak to people that run, it is the most wonderful gift. Running truly is a gift. Then, you have a purpose, and you fulfill that purpose, and you help others, and that's priceless.
Yeah, phenomenal.
And I've tried to do that gradually as I've gone along, and done the CEO sleep out 4 times, and you never sort of get a greater appreciation of how hard hundreds of thousands of people do it every day in Australia. Is when you sleep on a piece of cardboard outside in the winter, and you just got to do it for one night, and you go home to a nice warm bed and loads of food. But that gives you a great appreciation. I've worked with the Salvos, I've worked with Vinnies, done major fundraisers, a whole bunch of things, because the most validating and worthwhile thing is that humility and giving back.
And that obviously helps with your perspective as well at the end of the day, because you've got a different perspective and you build those up over time as well.
Most Australia, there are things that happen in your life that are sad and tragic, and I'm not alluding to those, but for most things that happen to most Australians in a day, they probably put them in the top 0.001% of people in the world.
Yeah, and absolutely.
That is perspective and gratitude. Feeling good, feeling fortunate, appreciating what you have will empower you to achieve incredible things.
Now, the 4 second rule. I know the 3 second. I think we know the 3 second rule when the sausage roll rolls off the table. But what's the 4 second rule?
Do not eat sausage rolls, guys. Don't eat sausage rolls. So that's my rule. That's my 3 second rule. Say no to a sausage roll.
Got it.
Yeah, look, the 4-second rule. If I've observed human beings and predominantly myself, we make 3,500 decisions a day. Probably that's what they tell us. And a lot of those, some are instinctive, a lot of those save your life. Don't cross the road now. Is there a car coming? That kind of stuff. But we make these decisions about discretionary effort. And for me, that put simply is taking the easier road or the harder road. And it applies very much to exercise, very much, because a very small proportion of our population exercise regularly and or what we eat. But specifically to exercise or other things in business, or you fear something. So the longer you give yourself around a decision, should I go running this morning? The longer, instead of going with your heart, you go with your head, which says, oh, I don't feel like it today, I'm tired, I'm blah, 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 whatever. Whatever the excuses are. I gave myself 4 seconds to make a decision. And because, especially in the early days, you wake up in winter, it's cold, you're in bed, you got to go for a run, or the pool. I couldn't stand swimming. To go to a pool, you think, lying there in bed thinking about going to the pool, you just think yourself out of it. So I just gave myself 4 seconds to make decisions, and I would follow my heart every time, and I would just go do it. And I tried to encourage others in business to do the same. Examples like, we'd often go to forums where you'd be amongst peers, and it'd be a kind of offsite or a training course, and the facilitator would go, hey, who wants to come up and do a role play? And everyone would go, don't look at me. Yeah, we've all done it, especially with a big crowd. And so I realized that when that happens, if you just immediately go, yeah, I'll do it, your fear will go away. And you've got nothing to lose, and everyone admires you for just sticking your hand up. Your whole mental state changes. So I've encouraged lots of other people to do that. Just don't even think about it. Just go do it. Do not let your fear talk you, or your lazy or alter ego talk you out of doing something that's going to be really, really good for you and potentially change your life.
So you get out of bed every day within 4 seconds. But more importantly, it's less about that, and just if the answer should be yes, you can't talk yourself out of it within 4 seconds. So therefore, it is yes.
Yeah, it is yes. And you don't need to leap out of bed in 4 seconds, but you need to be committed to do. You need to go, yeah, I'm going to do that. As soon as that voice says, oh, it's cold, don't do this, excuses, go, no, I'm going to do it. And I realized this, about 26 years ago. I sort of adapted this saying from something I heard at a conference, because people often go to conferences, they hear incredible speakers and they're wowed, and they go away and nothing changes. And so one of my favorite quotes is, to be truly successful at anything in life, you must first do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it until you do. So I trained my brain. As soon as my brain said, Jason, you don't want to do that, that automatically to me would mean, if I do it, I will be successful. So I went, oh, you don't want to do that. I went, success, and you go.
Yep, absolutely. And so I suppose we were talking before we jumped online just about the things that you've done recently that were outside of your comfort zone, which is obviously writing a book first and foremost, which documents your journey, but also then the self-promotion or social media efforts that go on.
Yeah.
Advisors are having to do this, and there's a few advisors that do it amazingly well. But social media is a way in which we can communicate with our audiences. How have you tackled that problem yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, just to go back, if anyone wants to look up my book, it's Unlimited: The Art of Being Limitless. Sorry, that's the last.
And we'll put it in the.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys. On you,
those kind of things as well, so everyone can get it across.
Yeah. So sorry, what was that? So sorry, what was the question?
About the social media.
Yeah. So I've always been on LinkedIn a fair bit, but probably with a kind of business facade instead of being really me and a human being. What you think other people want you to be as a CEO or a leader. And I hadn't been onto Facebook. I set an account up 13 years ago and then never went back in. You can go and check that so you can see. Because my life, my life when I go away from work is really private. I don't generally share it other than with people I know. So certainly not on social media. I'm not going to post a picture of food or my family or anyone or anything. So I've had to go out there. So with my book, my greatest fear was it's a really big personal thing to write your life. And it takes immense effort. And I kept all the time I was writing, I thought, what if no one likes it? What if nobody reads it? What if people, take the piss out of it, whatever? Or what about all the people I know like Craig, going to think, oh, he's this idiot writing about his life thinking someone's going to want to read it. And I went, you know what? For the last 25 years, you've faced all your fears and you've gone after it, and you've learned that you've got nothing to lose. When you face your fears, you have nothing to lose. So I wrote it, and then I got declined by I wrote it 3 or 4 times, every publisher in town. And I went, sod it, that makes me even more determined. And so I self-published. I got on Facebook, and I just went for it. And, I'd love every time somebody goes on and buys a book, that means that's a life that potentially I can change. And the feedback I get one piece of feedback makes it all worthwhile. But it's going pretty well, like I just self-promote. I don't pay for promotion. People in 17 different countries around the world are reading it at the moment.
And it's
same with advisors. And can I just say, being specifically with advisory, and I've always tried to teach advisors and say, when you talk about what's your value proposition, you meet someone, they go, what do you do? Don't go, oh, I'm a senior financial advisor.
Yeah.
Like, you're probably amazing, but that doesn't say you're amazing, and everyone else is a senior financial advisor. So, why don't you say, if I've heard some great ones, but, for example, hey, I help women who are, really challenging times in their life to get financial freedom or something like that, but just actually in human terms, share what it is you do. So if your LinkedIn profile says I'm a senior financial advisor, go and change it. What is it in a sentence, and get out there and do it.
Yeah. And so that's, as we know, it's like the thing with social media is that if you could just use the things about talking to humans in general and do it online, it works really well. So that the moment you go, I'm an advisor, you might as well set an accountant to lots of people because it's just not interesting to them, and so they'll shut off. But yes, if there's a few other ways to do it, but the way in which you've tackled it is something that I talk about often. Is that people go, well, you're an overnight success, and you're like, well, not really. I spent 35 years getting to this point, or you spent 3 years writing the book and then posting, and that's the effort that has to go in before people start to notice. So all of the effort, whether it was all of your training before your first Ironman or all of the social media things you did before anyone was watching, that's what meant that you're an overnight success.
Yeah. Well, and again, absolutely true in business. And case in point, for the races that are absolute pinnacles of achievement, I had to cycle 2.5 times around the planet and run 3.5 times to achieve them in every weather, in the dark, when it was pouring with rain, when I was sick, when I had, terrible injuries, running with plastic skin on my back, and, you name it. There are some strange ones. No excuses, unless it is absolutely not humanly possible. I would do every single training session that I planned to do, which was twice a day, every day.
Probably a nice spot to finish up on, guys. I think that's.
I'm gonna go for a run, Craig.
I'm no longer going to eat sausage rolls. When my brain tells me not to do it, I'm going to do it. And I might even go out for a little run this afternoon, which might shock everyone in my neighbourhood. But anyway,
you got to start somewhere.
Not mine. So, Jason, look, mate, thank you for sharing your messages with us today. There's some critical stuff in there, which even if you're not trying to run an ultra marathon, but just trying to achieve one small thing, to just go after it and not be afraid of it and go and get it no matter what it is.
Go after it with all your heart. You've got nothing to lose. The only loss is if you don't, because one day you will deeply regret it.
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jason. That was it.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.
episode 51 of Uncommon Sense. So I will put a link if you've made it this far, watching it live. Thank you very much. Otherwise, you're watching it afterwards, which means you'll see the links below in terms of the link to Jason's book and website and our normal links. So great to have you on board, Jason, and we'll see everyone next fortnight. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Dean.